Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Join Terry with Tracer Rounds every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern to hear interviews with veteran artists, veteran business owners, and businesses that support veterans. Catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and MB Radio. If you miss a show, you can listen again on Wreaths Across America Radio every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to see if you are on target. MBR, giving veterans a voice.
And welcome back to the Tracer Rounds podcast on Military Broadcast Radio, where we're giving veterans a voice. And tonight's voice is Mike Smith. He's also a veteran. And welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you very much, Terry, for having me on. And I just am so pleased to be here and share my testimony and share my message about hope and redemption after the military, the transition, and everything that my life has been since leaving the military. So God bless you for all you do for the service members across the U.S. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We're pleased to have you as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your military service? I know that it relates directly to the story that we're going to talk about, but can you tell us maybe how many years you were in and what branch and some of those details?
Yeah, I was in the Air Force for no other reason than my dad was in the Air Force. And to tie it in, my dad passed away when I was 15 of a massive heart attack. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'll get into this during the interview, but I'm a 2-time suicide survivor. But so I was in the Air Force in the mid 80s, and that's when Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan both had their big war on drugs. And in my life, once we transitioned from living in Sauk Center, Minnesota, in my dad lost his job as a JCPenney manager, clothing store guy. And once he got fired, we were out of options. So we moved to Barnesville. And that's where we were at when, like I said, I moved when I was 12. And that was a tough transition. So we ended up, after he passed away, losing the house to the bank and the clothing store and everything else. So that led me to the military. So that's just a little bit of background about it. But it was a tough time for me because I was introduced at a young age when I did move to Barnesville at age 12 to be basically doing drugs and drinking at a very young age with my only friend in high school, John Hansen. And that was my way of coping with the transition at that young age. And like I said, 3 years into the move, my dad died. So my mom would make it clear that we were losing our house to the bank and the clothing store to the bank. And so To me, I did try college after high school for 1 year, but flunked out of that pretty quick. So then I transitioned into the Air Force. The one thing I'll share with you guys is kind of cool that my mom did. She had a picture of my dad when he was serving in Korea in his enlistment dress blues, and then she had my graduation picture from the Air Force basic training dress blue shot of me. So they always said that I looked exactly like my dad. And when I went home on leave, she had the two sitting side by side. And I never saw the resemblance until then between my dad and myself. So I think he would have been proud of me, but the military career was cut short because I started using pot in the military with 11 other guys, and it ranked all the way up to colonel. That got busted. That because a guy that was using pot came on base and tried to sell a pound of it to an undercover cop, and so he named names of people that were also using, and that led me in a very tough road in life to be now not only nowhere to go back home because everything was gone, but now I've been kicked out of the military. And there's so many stories that I can share about that time in the service and about how God had his hand on my life all throughout it. And I journaled about it, for decades. And that went into my book, which I just got published here in January, which we'll get into later. But it was an interesting ride. I remember being in a treatment center one time post-military, and I said, guys, I just don't feel like a veteran because, I was kicked out before I served my full term. And they said, Mike, you got to look at it like this. If you served your country even one day active duty, you're a veteran. And, carrying that guilt with me, I have so much respect for the veterans that did serve honorably. And these days, I'm doing a lot to kind of bring awareness to all the mental health people that are veterans as well as non-veterans. As you can see on my shirt here, it says 22 veterans per day. And with crosses on both sides, that's the amount of veterans that take their own lives. And that's a sad number that needs to be talked about more. There's a lot more awareness with mental health these days with the veterans and stuff that weren't available when I was going through all my trials back in the 80s. So I'm a big advocate for that. I just happened to be on a show earlier today and shared my second suicide attempt with this lady, and she said, Mike, your story just resonates with me so much because that's what happened to my late husband. Was he tried to hang himself in the basement just like you did. The only difference is he succeeded, and he became one of those statistics about the 22. She's carrying on right now, and she's doing great things for her community out in Denver. So I'm so blessed to be able to have these platforms to go on these shows and reach as many people as I have with my message. I've been on almost over 200 countries now and with my message since the first of the year. And I can share this with you guys is that this past December 14th, so it's been not quite a year, we're coming up on the anniversary of me losing my best friend to cancer. And I was taking him to all of his radiation appointments and taking him out to eat and just loving on him as best as I could. And he asked me a question one time. He said, Mike, do you think I'm going to die soon? And I said, well, you know what, Brad? Here's the way you got to look at that, my friend. Even if you were to pass away soon, and I'm not saying you're going to, but look at how you're going to be leaving all of us behind that have to go through this life and struggle with all of our issues. And, you're going to be so much better off, man, to be in eternity with all your loved ones. And I just can't say enough about how great a guy you are. And put a good word in there to the big guy, because I'm not sure if I'm going to make it with the life I've lived. But you can see all the gray in my beard. It's been a long journey. I lived in 2 different homeless shelters as a veteran that were military homeless shelters. I had civil commitments placed on me in 2 states. I write about in my sample chapters on my website some very graphic things that happened to me because of my mental illness and being bipolar. I was undiagnosed with my mental illness for 11 years between those 2 episodes on the sample chapters at theguttergospel.com. You guys can read all about those if you want to proceed after reading those. As we were talking before we came on air, they're kind of raw and very graphic, and we're not going to use that language, but you can see how powerful and how terrifying both those episodes were. The first one was seeing my dad appear to me 8 years after he had passed away, after I got kicked out of the military. I was in this house with a good buddy of mine that happened to be a veteran as well. We rented this house together, and he was at work this one day that happened to be an off day for me when this happened to me, that you can read about in the first sample chapter. And it was so terrifying to see my dad appear. And, he was saying to me, Mike, go take your life, and all this other stuff that got very graphic and horrifying. And I wound up not taking my life, obviously, but the scars remained and still remain from that episode. I take a very heartfelt drive over to Moorhead every morning, past that house, to see how far I've come in life, since that episode in summer of '88, July 31st to be exact. I'll never forget it because it scarred me so deeply. But to be undiagnosed from that episode up until the second sample chapter in '99. So for 11 years, I wasn't on any medication for my mental illness. I wasn't diagnosed. And in '99, the episode was even worse because it was me in a padded cell in a straitjacket, touring hell for 3 straight days. And coming out of that, I'll never forget, there was this sweet nurse that said to me, she came into my room like 2 or 3 days after that experience and said, Mike, I want to share something with you. And she said, my name is Nurse Amy. And, Mike, when you were in that place and you were first starting to come out of it again, you look like a cornered animal because your eyes were as big as saucers from having gone through that. And that, as you can imagine, also scarred me deeply for life. So, it's been a battle my entire life. And I know I'm kind of not filling in a lot of blanks. I'll leave the questions for you to kind of help me do that. But 2 homeless shelters and 2 civil commitments with my mental illness. I actually spent time in 2 different jails. And when everybody had given up on me, they stuck me in the state mental institution for 6 weeks. And every week, what they would do is they would put me in the back of a paddy wagon and they would shackle me. For some reason, they thought I was a danger, and I don't know why, because I never threatened anybody. But I remember going transported from the state hospital out in Jamestown, which is 100 miles straight west of us in Fargo. And then they would bring me to Fargo to stand trial to see if I could be let free. And I remember not being able to articulate anything and just crying in front of the judges, and they would deny my freedoms every time for 5 straight weeks. So then finally the 6th week hit, and they said, okay, well, we're going to release you, but not back into freedom. We're going to put you in a homeless shelter called Project Heart, which had veterans upstairs in the facility. Then it had people transitioning out of the prisons in the downstairs of the same facility, and we would eat all of our meals together. So What happened after that was what changed everything in my life. And that was that one day there was this lady that came in and that worked at Project Heart. And she said, Mike, you got some mail here. And it was 2 big service checks for military back pay for all those years that I had been left alone and left to die, basically. And so I picked up all my stuff and hightailed it there. And the rest is history. I wound up, getting the 100% service connection from the military, and so much that I can share in between all those episodes and all the trials and all the love that God had shown through all these people on my journey. And it gets me emotional sometimes when I talk about it, like I did earlier today, because it's so raw and powerful. And, there's my favorite verse in the entire Bible is Revelations 12:11 that says, we've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And there's so much power in that. Veterans are a special breed. And when they get help and they share their testimony about being in battle or whatever the case may be, and how they overcame all these obstacles to bless other people, there's so much power in that, and that would be the message I want to leave with people, is to say, you've got such a powerful voice, that resonates to reach only one. If you can reach one other person with your story, then your life would have been well served.
Right. I agree. We need to take a quick break. And so we're going to play Rob Fest Rebirth, and then we'll be right back with Mike Smith. Here we go.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard, MBR Talk.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
And we're back on Military Broadcast Radio on the Tracer Rounds podcast. And my guest is Mike Smith. And we're talking about your military service and how you were discharged from the military for smoking marijuana, basically. But you had other problems, and all these problems kind of led you to the point where you were homeless and where you were being committed to psychiatric wards and that type of thing. But through all of these trials and struggles, you finally found your inner peace, and God started talking to you and kind of giving you that sense of purpose and peace again that you were striving for. But so I think where we left off, we were talking about one of the last times that you were committed for 6 weeks, and how the judge wouldn't release you each time that you went before him because he just didn't feel like, I guess, you were ready. But so, and through all this, were you documenting your story? Because you talked about journaling through the whole thing. So were you journaling through the story, and then that's how you came up with your manuscript, your memoir, Guttural Gospel?
Yes, exactly right, Terry. Yeah, I remember being on all those different psych wards throughout my life and all those other trials I mentioned earlier. And for some reason, I just felt so alone that I just would always write my thoughts down. And I remember being on one psych unit, one of the last ones before I went into my first homeless shelter. They were examining me, and I happened to make friends with another veteran up there. And he shared this with me. He said, Mike, I've read some of your stuff, and I see that you now have lost everything. And when you journal, it's so powerful, and it's so raw. And where does that come from? And I said, well, to answer your question, it comes from all the pain. And there was a chapter I was going to put in my book called Purpose from Pain, and there's a lot of truth in that. It didn't make the final cut, but the point being is that I think we all can relate to so much pain in our life that we have gone through individually, that there's purpose in that, that God's not done writing your story about how it's going to end and bless somebody else. And so he goes, and this, he said kind of half-heartedly, but he was being sincere. He said, you remind me a lot, Mike, about Job in the Bible, how you lost everything and you continue to have nothing to your name, but you continue to praise God in all this. You see the silver lining when nobody else does. And I think that's part of the bipolar stuff. I can share a story with you that really resonates, and I think is going to help a lot of people that I share on all my shows, which is this. In the mid-90s, before the second occasion, or I should say event, of that padded cell. So now we're in about the year 94 or 5. I had this job before I got promoted in the transit system. Prior to that, I was driving a van around Lakes Country, and I was listening to this radio show called the Minrith Meyer Clinic. And it was 2 Christian psychiatrists talking. And they said, the one said to the other doctor, he said, Frank, I have 7 kids that are all high achievers, except my second youngest boy. He's bipolar. And the other kids are all either doctors, professors, or lawyers, or you name it. But there's something special about that little guy that one day is going to outshine the rest of them, I think, by far. And that's kind of my message in a nutshell, to encourage people and say, I'm kind of that guy. It happens to be that I relate to it so much because my oldest sister is a doctor and the others are all high achievers. And then you got me, who is the second youngest in the family, that is bipolar. And now, like I shared a while ago with you guys, is that I have been in 200 and some odd countries in every continent with my message since the first of the year. And none of the other kids in my family have that platform. And I just look at it as such a blessing to have gone through all those trials and come out the other end to be able to help other people. And that's really what drives me these days. I'm very involved with the jail chaplain ministry here in Fargo. And the Seeds of Hope Food Pantry, where we feed the poor, and so many other worthwhile causes that it's just a blessing to be able to help. I'll just give you this as an example. The Seeds of Hope Food Pantry I was just introduced to this summer, and in the course of being introduced to them until today, I was able to reach, I should say, donate over $5,000 from my Donate Now tab on my website. That was a blessing to be able to give that much money to those guys just by sharing my testimony, on these shows.
That's awesome.
So, who else can you think of that had gone through everything I've shared with you, and to be able to come out the other side and say, I not only survived it, but I've thrived in it.
Right. I read your story, and I haven't read the whole thing, so let me clarify what I'm saying. But I read those sample chapters, and the first chapter that I read, I mean, like, I would have been just terrified, scared to death. What you went through with, you were talking about your vision of your father coming to you and telling you that, you should end your life and things like that, and then everything surrounding that. I can't imagine. And then when you're in the padded cell and it sounds like you virtually visited hell,
Right.
you
Yep.
know, and you were just tormented, basically for those days. And it's like, I don't know how you're still standing. I mean, it's just God, I guess. I mean, I don't know how else you survive something like that and come out and still be thriving, as you say, and giving your testimony and your message out, because that was an amazing set of events that transpired, and a lesser man may not have made it out the other side of that, for sure.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and that kind of leads up to my second suicide attempt, which I didn't really get into, but I'll share it now. Is that after that padded cell incident, I couldn't function in society. So I lost my managerial role at the transit system, and had to do really bad, odd jobs to try and make ends meet for our family. I remember that we were so poor that we had to cash in our aluminum cans to be able to get 1 gallon of milk, and
Mm.
that's how poor we were. So I was a cab driver. Was one of the worst jobs, which led to the second suicide attempt. I had to take all the drunks around to the bars at night. And
Mm.
they would tease me and make fun of me and say stuff like, what's the matter with you, loser? You can't get a real job in life, and all this other stuff. And I remember feeling so discouraged that I started to hang myself in the basement of our house. And I remember this still quiet voice that said, right as I was about to kick the stool out, like you talk about, give up, right? I said,
Right.
I was about to, and the still quiet voice said to me, Mike, your life still has a purpose. And I remember just being in tears, and that's what stopped me. And I don't know if you can contribute that. I call it God, and intervening and basically giving me a purpose through all the pain, and saying, I didn't know, where it would lead me, obviously, at that time.
Yeah.
But there would be all these trials and tribulations, like we've been talking about, that had to take place in order for me to come out the other side. And what I understood now, looking back on it all, is to say that I really have an empathetic heart towards people that are hurting. And I wouldn't have had that if I just would have had a normal, quote unquote, job in life. So I'll share that with you.
So we have a question from Eric. He says, do you think you can ask Mike what kept him pushing through those tough times?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, Eric, if I had to answer it honestly, I think I have to credit it all to God, and looking back and saying, it wasn't my own strength. It couldn't have been, because of the fact that I was ready to just cash in my chips twice. And there were so many other dark moments that I haven't shared yet, that there was just, either call it a belief system in myself or God or both. And, we just have to understand that God has the final say and the final plan. We see the world in this chaotic state it's in now, and we know that everybody is hurting so much, and it's our job to love on them all unconditionally. I always say this, and that is that I've read The Purpose Driven Life, that book, and the way it ends, and I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but I will right now. It is that we are all here with imperfect parents, imperfect everything, to go out and spread the gospel and carry out the Great Commission. And that was kind of my belief system that kept me going. And what I shared earlier about that little boy that was going to outshine the rest of those people by far. So I hope that answers your question, Eric.
Yeah, I wonder at what point did you start writing this memoir? So how far away from all this struggle did you start to actually, I know you said you journaled for,
Yeah.
for years, but at what point did you start to put all these moments, all these events together to make this memoir?
Well, that's a good question. And it was after my buddy Brad died. Watching him, I got into a deep depression, to be honest with you, for about 2 weeks
Yeah.
after December 14th, this past December. And so I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself after the first of the year rolled around. I was still in mourning about Brad. And I just thought to myself one day, I should make something out of all these notes and honor Brad's memory by completing this project and mentioning Brad on all the shows I go on, which I do. And so he's got a best friend by the name of Chrissy, which was Brad's next door neighbor. And I always make sure to check in with Chrissy every day and show her all the shows I'm on. And she just says to me, Brad would be so proud of you.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I have no doubt. So the manuscript, I had the link up. It's on your website. It's on, let me put it back up real quick. And it's a PDF and people can download it, right?
Yes, ma'am. On the home page, on the very bottom of the home page, you can go down there and find the book for $7.99, and you can read all about the trials. And to answer your question about how it all started, all the journaling started, one thing I'd like to share about that with your audience is that there was this Book of the Month club 30 years or so ago with Oprah that invited a guy on, and this was what started the journaling. Okay. I remember this very clearly, and it's kind of funny. There was this guy that came on called something about a million pieces, or my memoir of a million pieces, or something like that. And so he's sharing all these events about his so-called true life story, right? And come to find out, what happened that night was people were calling in that knew him, were saying this is all made up, or most of it is. So Oprah invited him back like the following day or two and chastised him for coming on her show with a fake book, right?
Oh, no.
So I turned to my wife, and this is what started the writing. I said, I could start my own book, because I had the sample chapters by then in my head, right?
Right,
And
yeah.
I said, and it would all be true, and I wouldn't have to fabricate anything. And little did I know at the time how much more of the trials and tribulations I would have had to have gone through all those following years to complete the full book. And so that's your answer about the memoir, how it all got put together, the beginning of it, all the trials in between, and how it all got wrapped together by the guys out in New York this past January. So it's only been out a little under a year. So you can pick up your copy. You can hit my donate tab to help fund the guys at Seeds of Hope for the food pantry, which is on theguttergospel.com. And you can, just reach out to me. I want to make sure I get this out before we get off this point, which is reach me directly. If you feel like you have not have anyone in your life, I'm going to give you my business personal email, which is simply mike@theguttergospel.com, which I'd like in the show notes to say that is how you can reach me. And I'll promise you, I will get back to you just as soon as I can. That's the first thing I do every morning after I read out of the Life Recovery Bible, is to read those emails. And that's a big part of what helps keep me grounded and focused, is hearing from hurting veterans, hearing from hurting people in general, but mostly veterans.
So we talked a little bit before the show, but so you were married during a lot of this time, and so how was it for your wife of supporting you through this, and how was that struggle for her? Because I can't imagine trying to love someone through all the different struggles you were having. I mean, she's obviously an amazing person to, stand by your side and kind of help walk you through all this. So, what was her role in helping towards this recovery, or just being a part of your recovery?
Well, I tell you what, without her, I wouldn't be here. Let's put it that way nicely. She was my rock. And the only reason I had to go through all those homeless shelters and civil commitments in the institution was she in jail. She said, Mike, I just can't have you back at the house because you got to get your medications balanced. And that was, painful. But I look back on it now and I totally understand it, because I wouldn't want to have to live with somebody like that on a daily basis, so it all is going good now, but not without a lot of scar tissue and
Yeah.
not without a lot of emotional pain and baggage on everybody's side, for me, to my son, to my wife. And, that's why these days I give them as much as I can out of my disability check on the first of every month. And that's my way of kind of paying it back and saying, I remember all those painful times where you carried me. So,
Right. Yeah, speaking of that disability check, did you file that, or did somebody file that on your behalf? Because it sounded like you were surprised to have gotten it. So
yes.
how did that come about? Do you know?
Yeah. This story is painful to share because I have a hard time without getting emotional sharing this, but here's the truth. So after two civil commitments, I wound up in a jail, in Cass County Jail up here in Fargo, and cycling severely, very severely. Um, and this is in the book, and the chapter's 2019, the year in review. And this is how I got the service connection checks. Was my doctor, my psychiatrist, saw me in jail naked, covered head to toe in my own feces, cycling severely.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's when he made the decision to put me in the state institution and filed the claim.
Yeah.
So they expedited it. So I got it in like 2-3 months.
Wow. That's amazing that it
You want
it
to know the
came that
funniest part?
fast.
Yeah, you want to know the funniest part about it, Terry, is I remember being in a treatment center in St. Cloud and going up to check on getting 100% because everybody else down there in that veteran treatment center seemed to be getting 100%. I went up and said to the guy that was in charge of it in St. Cloud, and he goes, Mike, not only do I know you're never going to get any disability check, I can make a statement to you right now that I know for a fact, no matter what, you're never going to get a service connection disability.
Oh,
and then
wow.
and then here we are years later, and I got it, and it's a blessing for my family. So that kind of supports my ministry. When you go to the donate tab on my website, you can see my custom shirts, and it says support Mike and his recovery or something to that effect. And then there's the donate tab, which, like I said, helps feed the Seeds of Hope people. So it's all worth a good cause.
Yes, wow. That's amazing that that came, and it was so timely too, because you said that at that point when it came, that really changed your trajectory. It really changed where you were and where you were going, to have that help and that boost in, through the throes of all these experiences you had.
Yes, ma'am. You're exactly right, Terry. It was just a godsend, and that's about the best way I can sum it up, is to say it was just a total unmitigated blessing. It was just a godsend without doubt.
That's amazing. So let's see. I was going to ask you another question, and then I got a pop up, and it made me lose my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So I know you mentioned that you had trouble with alcohol too. That you had some run-ins with that as well. How in the midst of everything that was going on, how did you get treatment for that? Was that part of your treatment at the facilities, or what did you do to get yourself better from, being continually drinking? Because I know one of the chapters that you said that, you typically would soften the day with some alcohol to make things feel a little bit easier or
Mm.
better. So
Right.
how did you do that?
Well, it was forced on me, to be honest. Not anything that you would imagine, not anything that a treatment would cure, because I've been through so many treatment centers. What happened was, and I'm glad you have the visual up because you can see what I'm about to tell you, that I had a bad accident the last time I drank, which was I hit right here on my right deltoid on a door jamb. When I was so intoxicated, I fell shoulder first into this door jamb. And you look at the distance between here and here, which is not far. And had it hit here with the force I hit this with, which is permanently disabled, I
Wow.
would not be here today. I
Oh,
can't
wow.
raise my right arm any more than this. And on my left arm, as you can see, to make sure I don't drink, is choose this day whom you will serve with the red wristband, and the guttergospel.com with the blue one. And I hand those out everywhere I go. And I have my custom shirts, which is always a big door opener for people. They say, hey, I've seen you, I've heard about you, or I've read your story, or I was featured in an article up here with the Fargo Forum. I don't know if you had a chance to read that at all, but they did a write-up on my story here back September 28th. It was published in the Fargo Forum, which is the biggest media outlet up here. And I did a radio interview up here actually last December before Brad passed away. So my story was already starting to get out there, but that was my first introduction to actually starting to think that I might have a message to get out somehow, but just didn't know how it would actually come to be back then. So
Yeah.
now, 1 year later, almost exactly, here we are. So,
Yeah, God puts you in places where he can use you. And sometimes we don't realize the struggles we are going through is preparing us for something that we are meant to do. And so it just feels like we're being put upon, or maybe, like we're continuing to get things happening to us and we don't understand the reasoning. And then sometime later down the road, we kind of go, oh, that's why. We
yeah,
come to that realization or that revelation that, oh,
yeah,
this was preparing me for this time in my life or this situation in my life. And sometimes, hindsight, like they say, is 2020, and you can kind of see, okay, well, this wasn't easy to go through and this was a lot, but I see why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
yeah, that's very well said on your part. That's why I got all the gray in my beard. You know,
Right.
my wife always kids me that when I put my hood up and I put my sunglasses on, I look like the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, no.
So I got to get that shaved before Thanksgiving. In a couple days, we're going to have to be traveling for Thanksgiving, and I'm looking forward to it because I have a lot to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. And I think anybody hearing my testimony can kind of say the same thing, which is, I might have life bad, but I didn't have it as bad as Mike. So I'm kind of the canary that was put down the well, or the prodigal son that wandered so far off. I can use all kind of analogies like that to say, you don't have to go through all the trials and all those hard times like Mike. You just have to know that God loves you and he's got your back. So, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like that poem where it said, I don't know why, God, you're not walking beside me. I only see one set of footprints. And
Yeah.
then comes the realization that he was carrying the person, and that was
Yeah.
God's footprints, not his own.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we don't realize we've got somebody helping us, kind of guiding us, pushing us in the direction we should go, and we're not really sure how we're getting there or who's doing that, but it's kind of God steering us in the direction that He has planned, and we just we can't or don't see it at the time.
Well, it's kind of funny you'd say that, because that's the footprints that you had referenced, the footprints poem. And that kind of ties back into the Seeds of Hope. I had put all of my money and savings into going to Orlando, Florida, October 1st to the 4th, just this past October, to go to see if my story could get turned into a true life movie through the ICVM Storytellers Conference. And if you're familiar with those guys or never heard of them, basically, if you have ever seen like The Chosen or all these faith-based movies or TV series, they are the guys that produce them all. And they are all the filmmakers that come from all over the world to hear you pitch your story to them. So I was going to be a sponsor there. And that kind of led me, well, it did lead me directly to Seeds of Hope instead of going to the conference, because a buddy of mine in my small men's group on Saturdays invited me out to the food pantry where he donates his time. And that was like 2 or 3 months before I was scheduled to fly out, when I had everything paid for. So I was like, you know what, God, after seeing that operation with him that night, I just canceled all my flight and hotel and everything. And that's where a lot of that refund money went to, was to the Seeds of Hope people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's what, like you just said, Terry, when you're talking about how God will direct your path and carry you, it's like God just gently and lovingly said to me, Mike, you're going in this direction. I'm going to turn you around 180 degrees to go that direction, to be a servant and to help the poor. And I've been so blessed ever since that happened. My podcasting had doubled or tripled overnight almost.
Wow.
I got the feature article in the Forum after that within the same week, and everything just started to snowball. So it was like, yeah, God, you do have my back, I guess, right?
Right. Well, I mean, you're in the right place when doors start opening, where you kind of met some resistance and maybe doors didn't open and maybe you had to like pivot and go around sometimes. But when you know that doors have opened and things are happening, you're doing what you're meant to be doing, because,
Exactly.
things are in motion, and they're in motion for a reason.
That's right. Well said. Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're going to take another quick break, and then we'll be right back with Mike Smith, and we're going to play the Wreaths Across America. They're still taking wreath purchases for Christmas for laying wreaths on veterans' headstones. So if anybody wants to donate to that cause, we're still taking those wreath donations as well. So here we go.
At Military Broadcast Radio, the goal is to offer a platform for mental health advocacy while connecting the military community through various media platforms. Founded by U.S. Army veteran Joel Hunt, MBR gives a voice to veterans, first responders, and their families through streaming radio, podcasts, video, and outreach events. With its leadership run completely by veterans and hosts of the diverse programming from all branches of service, MBR was created as a response to the silent battles veterans face after service. Military Broadcast Radio is also a Wreaths Across America partner, hosting a $5 back sponsorship group page. For every veteran's wreath sponsored through the Military Broadcast Radio page, MBR receives $5 back to help support their platforms and outreach. Veteran and first responder stories need to be told and shared. And with your support, MBR can continue to bring together veteran nonprofits, mental health organizations, and government agencies to bridge the gap between veterans and vital resources. To find out more and donate, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org/MBR.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for supporting our channel by watching and listening.
Find us on the web at mbradio.net.
And we're back on the Tracer Rounds podcast, and we're with my guest tonight, Mike Smith. And so is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't already mention? Anything you want to put out to our guests, or anything that you just want to, it's on your heart to tell somebody tonight?
Yeah, Terry, I just want to end this way. Two things I'll share. I think I mentioned this earlier about reaching one. You know, we can all reach one that's in our circle of people that God put in your life. And my last Bible verse I'm going to leave you with is very fitting, I think, for tonight's show, which is right out of Psalms chapter 40, verse 1, which is, God brought me out of the miry pit and put my feet on a sure foundation. And God offers that hand up out of the miry pit, or the gutter gospel, or however you want to phrase it, and say, he gave you that life because, like the plaque said in the state institution, which I didn't show yet, I was crying out to God saying, why me, having a big pity party? And I look up in tears, and there was that plaque that said, you have been given this life because you're strong enough to live it.
Wow, that's a statement.
Yeah, so
Wow.
I wanted to get that out there as well. So that's something to remember, guys. And once again, feel free to reach out to me on my personal email, and you can follow me on Instagram at mike.theguttergospel.com, or go to my YouTube channel. For some reason, I was banned from Facebook. I'm not on Facebook because I screwed up trying to log in twice under the same account, so they thought I was doing some spoofing or something, so they banned for life. So I'm not on Facebook, but I'm not missing anything because I used to be on Facebook.
Right. I'm just amazed by your story, honestly, and I'm looking forward to really diving into your story further by getting the memoir and reading through that. But I have to say, you know, I'm the resilience that you've shown and the resilience of your family and those around supporting you is just amazing, because you've been through a whole lot, and so have they, honestly, you know, dealing with mental health issues, bipolar and alcoholism, and you know, just some of the other things that are byproducts of um, having those things in your life. So you know, I have to just say, to see you looking healthy and well, and to see you on this side of it is just nothing short of amazing.
Well, I would call it a miracle. And
Miracle.
I think a lot of people can relate to that you're a miracle too. You know, it says in the Bible that God knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. And that I want to also get this out there, which is that we all have special talents and gifts. We're all unique in God's eyes. You know, one of us does not have or the talents or look like anybody else on the planet. You're unique in God's eyes, and he's going to use you to bless somebody else. Just reach one.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I agree wholeheartedly. If we can each reach one person, then we can reach the world. I mean, we can help one another if we're just aiming at least for one. Hopefully, we get more. But if we're just trying to change somebody's life, then they can impact somebody else, and it's, you know, just a cascade that can happen if somebody is just willing to be that person to help them through something, or to empathize or sympathize, or just get them to the right place at the right time for treatment, or just however we can impact somebody else's life is what we're called to do, I think, just like you said.
Amen, Terry. Very well said.
Well, if you don't have any more things to share, I think we can just close out. But again, I read your story, and I was just in so awe. I was like afraid for you reading the story, and I was like, I don't know how he made it. And you mentioned like you ran away from it, and you got further away from those voices and whatnot, and you ran to the middle of the street. It's like, so you did run out of hearing those negative thoughts. So it's amazing that it was just in that place, and then when you left the place, that didn't follow you. I wonder why. Do you know why?
No, I can't answer that question. It just happened to be that, you know, it unfolded the way it did without explanation. You know, I remember what led up to the padded cell. I didn't share that, but it was, I'd sent away for the Tony Robbins Personal Power Series tapes, and was listening to those all the time. So driving back from my house in West Fargo to my office in Fargo, I was hearing from Tony or God or whatever saying, what do you really want out of life, Mike? And I kept thinking, well, more money, more time, more this, more that. It was like, no, no, no. And finally, I stopped my car in rush hour traffic on Main Avenue, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I heard this voice say, Mike, what do you really want out of life when it all boils down to it? And I finally got the answer, which was acceptance. I just want to feel like I'm accepted and loved, And the voice coming from the heavens said to me, Terry, and this is the truth, it's in the book. I wrote about this, and it said, Mike, I do love you and accept you unconditionally, and I died for you. Now go out and share that message with the world, and the rest is history, as they say. So,
right. Well, but so I was so interested in that because I did read that, and then I was interested that it led to kind of a manic episode, and then that's
Yep.
when they put you in
Yeah.
the padded room. But it's like, how did it transition that way? Because you were so joyful and so wanting to, tell people the good news, and
Right.
then it's shifted.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And once again, I can't explain it, but it's what happened. It just went from being very angelic to very demonic in a matter of the being transported by the police officer from like I said, on Main Avenue to the hospital, just a 10-minute drive, and putting me up for observation, and the rest is just demonic. And yeah, in the book and in the chapters, you can read it, and I would hope proceed to pick up a copy because it's worth the read.
Definitely. Yes. I definitely recommend it. If you want to hear a story that's full of resilience and full of triumph and struggle, you're definitely going to get it by picking up the memoir, because that is something else, I can tell you.
Yes, I appreciate the plug, Terry, very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, we put it in, I put it up on the notes to how to get a hold of you. So if anybody's
Beautiful.
trying to reach you and wants to reach out and, just share their story with you or ask you some more questions, we did put that out. So I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. I want to thank you for, you were worried earlier about the internet behaving, and it seemed like it did pretty well tonight. So I think, God wanted you to share your message tonight with this audience. And so I'm glad we went ahead and pushed forward, even though there was a little bit of doubt when we first got started. So.
Yeah, well, there was a glitch earlier. Like I said, it kept cutting in and out, but it just seemed to happen that God wanted this to happen tonight. So I'm glad it's back and working. So now I can stream some more of my favorite music once the show ends.
There you go. Awesome.
And let my dogs out. I don't know if you were able to hear them in the background, but they were acting up a little bit. So I apologize for that.
They just wanted to give their 2 cents too. They just had to have their voice tonight too. So we're sharing their voice with the world as well.
Well, you know what I always say about dogs, it's like dog spelled backwards is God, unconditional love. And that's the thing about dogs, they love you unconditionally, and I'm a big dog lover. So can't have enough of them. I'm going down to Brookings, South Dakota for Thanksgiving. We have 3, and the people we're going to, my brother-in-law's house has 5. So
my goodness. Wow.
It's going to be kind of an interesting Thanksgiving.
Yes. One for the dogs.
Yes, exactly. Taking all the food off the table, probably. Who knows? We'll see.
Gotta watch them.
Well, listen, Terry, I want to thank you so much for having me on, and God bless the vets, and all the work you do to give them a voice every Tuesday night. So
yes, sir.
You're doing the Lord's work by giving them their platform.
Well, thank you, and continue doing what you're doing, and we're here to support you. This is Trace Around signing off.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.